Tell us about the status of changing the trade status of Russia. That's something that people have been impatient about. I saw a report that perhaps Majority Leader Schumer said there's a deal on that. Should we expect that anytime soon?
I hope so. I've been working on this with Senator Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, for starting, I think, 2.5 weeks ago. The holdup is there is some Republican interest in expanding the bill sort of to other things, and I just think we need to be focused on denying permanent normal trade relations with Russia. I think this is a bit parenthetical, but what we've done as a nation on permanent trade relations, giving them China those advantages, have undermined our manufacturing as a country. One of the worst things I think we've done in 25 years. That's not this issue today, but we need to move on it quickly. We need to get a couple of Republicans to drop their insistence on expanding this into other areas and squeeze the Russians, as we're doing on these new sanctions against the Duma and other Russian political leaders.
Senator, let's turn to your status as the chair of the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. One question, of course, on all of our minds here at Bloomberg are those Fed nominees. We're down to 4 now. When should we expect a vote on the floor on those 4 nominees?
Well, as soon as we can get the vote. There is a Republican partisan opposition to one of the nominees, the first African-American woman on the Fed. She is. Every Republican voted no. Some called her not qualified, even though graduate of Spelman, Truman Scholar in Oxford, PhD at Berkeley. Always resistance when it's somebody that doesn't look like me on the Fed, always partisan resistance, and that's too bad. We're going to do this as fast as we can. There are some absences this week, but we will have those votes coming up, I would assume, early next week.
At this stage, do you utterly rule out the possibility of separating out Dr. Cook from the other 3?
I don't think there's any reason to do that. I think we move on all of them quickly, and there's no reason we can't move on them one after another. I guess the question would be to my colleagues, are you going to force long debates? We can always shorten debate time, but when debate time is lengthened, it's not really to debate, it's to stall and slow walk. And I would hope my colleagues would say, let's just bring them to the floor. Everybody that wants to can speak on them, but don't have all this downtime between votes. Let's do it. We can do it in the space of one day, once the will is there from both parties. And that's what I'm insisting on.
Senator, I believe you've just come from a hearing on equity in the appraisal process, oversight of what's going on with the banks in their lending practices, particularly mortgages. There's a report, as you know, on Bloomberg about Wells Fargo in particular, that there was a disparate effect in refinancing coming out of the pandemic. Less than 40% of the refinancings were approved. I'm not saying there was an intent, but there was a disparate effect. What can be done about this problem?
Yeah, I don't know if there was intent or not. I'm not making that judgment, but there is clearly disparate impact. But keep this in mind. Once government locked in 1933, government passed a law essentially leading to the 25 then, now 30-year mortgage. Immediately, government imposed, working with local governments and local realtors and all, redlining essentially on black neighborhoods and some immigrant neighborhoods. From 1934 to 1968, 98% of FHA loans went to white borrowers. And we are still recovering from that in many senses, and it's one of the reasons we have such segregation. So Wells Fargo, I fully support. I've asked the government to investigate this. They should be held responsible if the Bloomberg report, which was excellent, by the way, thank you. I'm not kissing up, but it was. If what you suggest is real and it's systemic, and whether it's purposeful or not, it was willful in the sense we've seen banks do this before, then they need to be held accountable for sure.
As you say, Senator, you've asked for a response from the CFPB and others about exactly what's happened there. Have you gotten a response from them yet?
No, but we expect them to. I mean, we've talked to them informally. They haven't. I mean, you send letters here that takes a while for them to answer them formally because they've got to I'm not a lawyer, but they've got to check with their lawyers to make sure the response is the right way. But I expect, I don't know, I don't have a prediction or an expectation of what the outcome will be, but I do expect them to get serious about looking at this and investigating this.
As you look at oversight in this area and possible regulation by the agencies themselves, how do you strike the right balance between, on the one hand, making sure that there is no discrimination at all, which is unforgettable in the process, but on the other hand, not imposing rules that actually have loans going to people who can't repay them? Because we've had some experience in the past with some of that.
Well, you've had that with white borrowers and black borrowers. You've had that with low-income borrowers, and you've also had it with middle-income and upper-income borrowers. So I think you start with that. But of course, you want to do that. But when we've seen cases, there's a case in Cincinnati in a suburb called Loveland where the family got an appraisal, and the realtor was shocked by how low the appraisal was. A black family. The realtor said, "Let's try something different." They took all the pictures of black children, black family members off the wall. They had a person appear at the home as if she were the homeowner, a white woman, and the appraisal was 20% higher. That's an anecdote, to be sure, but anecdotes are elements of data, and more you're seeing that this is happening. So we've got a lot of work to do, and your cautionary note is not incorrect. But we've got a lot of work to do, because if your appraisal is 25% less than it should have been, it means you can save 25% less. You can, when you sell your house for resale, when you borrow against college, all that, you're essentially taking a quarter of your net worth hit, or at least your home worth hit, and that keeps people further behind. We know that we build a middle class by home ownership. That's the fundamental tenet, the foundation of that, and much of America hasn't had a chance to do that the way people that look like me have.
Finally, Senator, I know you've taken a lot of interest in that vice chair of supervision role, not the four that are up now, but actually a nominee that you favored didn't make it through. You need to get that role filled. How are you going to do that and, as it were, thread the needle? Because you had some difficulties in the past, not just with Republicans, but even with the Democrat Joe Manchin. How can you get that seat filled with somebody that you think is right for that job of supervising the banks, and yet you can get through?
You know what advise and consent means, and the president makes the appointment. I can advise him, I can talk to him, so can any other member of the Senate or the public. Then we ultimately confirm consent, if you will. So we're talking to the White House about this. But keep in mind, the reason this nominee went down was all about the oil industry. When oil companies make a demand in this Congress, one whole political party, a party that essentially doesn't believe in the science of climate change, goes one bird off a telephone wire, they all fly off. And that's what happened. She was defeated. I mean, it never came to a vote, but she would have not have been confirmed, because all 50 Republicans in the end do the bidding of the oil industry. That's not a partisan statement. That's just fact. They used dark money. They were doing that to her. They made it personal, which is pretty bad. But more importantly, we lost a real champion who has an expert on cybersecurity, an expert on climate, the best, most qualified bank, FTC, a member potentially of the Federal Reserve than we've ever seen. The kind of qualifications she had were just exemplary, and they should be ashamed of themselves. But when it comes to the oil companies or guns and the NRA, they're never ashamed of themselves.